grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
You're listening to Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption. I'm one of your hosts, Jo Sparrow. This podcast is a production of Jigsaw Queensland Post-Adoption Support Service. However, the views expressed are those of the people participating, not necessarily Jigsaw Queensland. The podcast discusses adult themes and listener discretion is advised.
Hi everyone and welcome to Adopt Perspective. I'm your host, Jo Sparrow. Today's guest, Benjamin Kelleher, was adopted in Brazil in the city of, now I hope my pronunciation is right, Belo Horizonte. I hope I went well. You can tell me later, Benjamin. In 1989, at 13 months of age. He was one of 5,000 children in the orphanage at that time. And after his adoption, he grew up in the sunny beaches of the Gold Coast in Queensland, from where he joins us today. Benjamin recently participated in the creation of an educational video resource aimed at professional teachers, doctors and counsellors that was produced by InterCountry Adoptee Voices, or ICAV, as a lot of you know it, in partnership with Relationship Matters. Welcome to Adopt Perspective, Benjamin. I'm delighted to have you join us today.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on. And I think pronunciation myself, even I'm sort of making sure I get it right. Depends if I'm with other, Brazilians, and they'll probably tell me I'm getting it wrong. But as I'm learning, I'm kind of like Belo Horizonte. But
oh my goodness, Google really failed me this morning. Then,
like I said, I'm sure any Brazilians that might be watching probably like, oh, he butchered that. But, yeah.
Sounded a lot better than my version, my little phonetic Google attempt. Look, Benjamin, I guess we might start and see if it's okay with you, if you could share your story of adoption with us.
Yeah, sure. So it's been really kind of recent. I've delved into it. It's only been the last sort of few years that I've really, gone backwards to try and work out where I am now. So, the adoption story for me, I guess my parents, my adoptive parents, they went down the route of going the conventional way and trying to have kids, and that wasn't for them. And I think that they also tried IVF. They tried a lot of different areas, and I guess it came down to sort of adoption. So they'd gone through being in New South Wales, northern New South Wales. They'd gone through the New South Wales state and all their channels to adopt, and they were quite open to a lot of countries that were willing to be open to adoption at that time. And it just so happened to be that I kind of came across their path and they were able to say yes. So 1989 I was born, and it was 13 months later that they were able to go through obviously the massive process that intercountry adoption is, and make their way over to Brazil and pick up a little baby. At the time Marcos Flavio da Silva, and I'm now Benjamin James Kelleher. So
wow. So that would have been quite a trip for them. Did they have to go over to Brazil to grab you and bring you back? Obviously, yes. I would think yes. Yeah.
So I've done a little bit of sort of research on the process now, but back then at least they had to spend a fair bit of time in country as well. So all their official processes can be met to make sure, I guess, they're hopefully good people.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd spent some time there once, meeting me and going through all the paperwork and everything, and spending some time with me. So then I guess their version of child protection and all that sort of stuff can be sort of checking up and seeing that my welfare was being met before bringing me back to Australia and going through the process here. And they did spend a bit of time there as well. So
yeah. So how was it for you growing up adopted?
Very interesting. I guess I grew up in northern New South Wales in town Kingscliff. Has grown a lot in the last 5-10 years, but at the time it's kind of was a quiet, surfy, northern New South Wales sort of town. So adoption wasn't, very well known or big. Like I know in the early stages, I remember our family sort of going to these adoption picnics that were organized by different organizations. I haven't seen sort of many since. But there was one family in the Kingscliff area that had also adopted. So we were kind of close to them, and that was good having that connection. But otherwise, growing up, especially in the younger years, it's kind of just a different place to be, I guess, because being, I have a brother as well who's adopted from Colombia, a few years younger than myself, but so we've got 50% of our family was black and from South America, and 50% is obviously white Aussie. So from the get-go, it's not like there's some great sort of secret or something looming over the family. From the jump, you're adopted.
Yeah, there's no late discovery.
Absolutely, yeah. So I guess growing up, stepping into school or different things, different social aspects of life, you kind of know that there's just that different aspect about you, even about your family. You kind of, I guess, a little bit of a novelty for a lot of people in a way. And but I think obviously for kids, it's hard to fully grasp what adoption means, especially trying to explain to kids at school. And they're like, oh, so like, where's your real mum, or where's your real dad, or what does that mean? Or so many questions that you, as a kid, you kind of try and give answers to. But I guess you yourself, you're kind of working it out. And as you kind of develop, you have a bit more understanding of everything that's going on. But I mean, there's still so much even now. Becoming a parent myself kind of opened my eyes to so many different aspects to what adoption means, whether that's local adoption or intercountry adoption, all of that. But I mean, yeah, growing up, again, there weren't a lot of people of African complexion in my town either. So that alone, you kind of your novelty and you stand out anyway. And that kind of has both its positives and negatives, I found. Because I found myself, especially when you start growing into the high schooling and those later years, where I guess fitting in and all those sorts of pressures start to hit teens in all sorts of ways. So they're trying to find themselves. For me, it kind of relieved a little bit of pressure because I already knew I was different. So it's kind of like I've got no hope fitting in, so to speak, no matter how hard I want to try. I can go out and I can buy all the cool stuff that's out right now. I can do all this sort of things. But at the end of the day, like, my family, some of my family's from this part of the world, some of my family's from that part of the world, some of my family looks like this, some of them look like that. There's so many aspects where it's like, yeah, you're different. You're not hiding that one, which kind of just meant I could just be. It kind of just puts you in a place where growing up, you can kind of just be because you got no other choice. So in that aspect, growing up adopted was not too bad. And then I guess other ways I'm finding more as I grow and I guess explore adoption, I'm kind of now linking things that were going on for me growing up more to the adoption journey. Both good and, I want to say bad or challenging.
Yeah. It really is a lifelong journey, isn't it? Like different things come up in your life, you have kids, you get married, things happen, and suddenly adoption is something you're thinking about again, and it opens up, new ways for you to think about it, I guess, and understand it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, Benjamin, I was on a 4, and the other 3 were biological children of my parents. So I was the only adoptee. So I didn't have anyone in my family to compare to, as in, another adoptee to talk about it with or to influence. So I was just wondering, you mentioned that you had other adopted people in your immediate family. Do you have any thoughts on how that might have impacted your experience?
Well, yeah, I guess definitely on the flip side, I guess, to your experience, having a brother to somewhat bounce off, and you kind of got that something to connect the two of you.
Yeah.
I've noticed obviously everyone's adoption journey seems to be different. Obviously, there's a lot of ways that connect everyone that's adopted, and there's things that someone will come and we'll have a discussion, and someone will say, "Oh, I felt like this growing up." I'm like, "Oh, I never really experienced that," and that sort of thing. But funnily enough, like my adoptive father, he was also adopted. So,
Oh, wow.
Out of the 4 people in our family, 3 were adopted.
Yeah.
But then in saying that, growing up for us, it was kind of never spoken about, whether it was because it was kind of, we were all adopted, so it's like, we're all adopted, so it's normal, so don't even worry about it, or whether it was a case of our parents trying to find a way to normalize everything. Because I've also noticed, again, parenting, every parent tries to do what they can with what they've got. And I know for some, like, it'd be such a journey for parents to, I guess, like any parent, to work out, like, am I doing the right thing? Is this going to screw my kid up later? Like, some parents might really try and delve into adoption and make it just an open discussion at all times. And obviously some, definitely in our family, it seemed like it was kind of in a way of normalizing, or trying to not make a big thing of our existence, almost trying not to bring it up too much. So then growing up, it was just never really spoken about. And I guess now I'm kind of like, oh, it's kind of a bit odd, or that's a bit, I don't know if that's really helpful or whatnot. But definitely, at least having my brother sort of there, and we look somewhat similar, I guess, complexion at least anyway. That's definitely helped, as opposed to, say, like your story of sort of being the only sibling. That would have been a really different place to be in, I guess.
Yeah. I really do understand that. Like you said, as a parent, you get to look and reflect back on things. And sometimes you don't want to make a big deal out of something in case you're making it a bigger deal than what it is to the kid. And then the vice versa as well. Sometimes they might get the impression they can't talk about it because you aren't. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I think so. And I think one thing that has been very common with a lot of adoptees that I've spoken to is that whole finding how to teeter on the line of the whole being grateful. So the thing of, like, okay, like, it's not really spoken about, or whether it is or not, but okay, do I bring it up if I've got questions? Is that, me rocking the boat? Should I just be grateful because I've got this amazing life, I've got these people that have adopted me, and I've got a roof over my head and all those sorts of things? And again, as speaking to my brother, I don't know if he's sort of been as deep as I was in some of the feelings and things going on in my head. But for me, growing up from a very, very young age, and I know I mentioned this on that ICAV, the videos, but for me, growing up, it was a case of be seen but not heard. So I didn't ask too many questions either, because for me it was about not rocking the boat. And okay, what does the perfect child look like? Because as much as, watching my favorite sitcoms, especially Fresh Prince and stuff, I used to love that show, but it had this kind of it painted this image of this family and this unbreakable bond between people because they're related by blood. And for me, it was like, well, I don't know if that's particularly accurate, because your own flesh and blood can give you away if they want to. Who's to say anyone else can't? So therefore, you better kind of just, watch your step, do what you've got to do, don't rock the boat, and then there's no reason for anyone else to want to give you away. So I think that alone can kind of influence whether or not, as an adoptee, you speak out when maybe you've got questions or want to ask different things. I think it kind of goes both ways. I find my family probably had a bit to do with whether we did or didn't speak about and bring up adoption, and then obviously my own internal sort of talk and things like that. And growing up, you can see how that can kind of start to influence a lot of areas in your life.
Yeah. Well, I guess that brings me to a question I was going to ask you about later, because when I was growing up, I was very cognizant of the fact that if one set of parents has given me away, then my adoptive parents could also do so. And that sort of sat in the background of, my thinking. And so as a consequence, I was about 13 before I stayed a night away from my parents, unless my brother was with me, because in my head, I thought, well, he's their kid, so they'll come back for him. So if he's with me, I'm all right. But if he's not with me, so I would get terribly homesick. I would never stay away from them. And I did wonder, what was your experience like in that regard? Like, is that something you thought about, that you could be given away, or?
Yeah, absolutely. like I said, that it forced, I can't say forced, it was my own choice, but it influenced how I was as a child in terms of I was always the quiet, very, very quiet, very much the people that have known me all my life still sort of like, oh, you're always quiet, just so easygoing, so very much, because it was always like, oh, like, do you want something to eat? Like, oh no, it's fine. It's like just be polite, just say no, and just, there's no reason for anyone to think you're being a burden or anything like that could possibly jeopardize your place in where you are. So it was kind of I developed this persona that absolutely became me. Like I think for the longest time I was just that quiet, easygoing,
compliant.
As to this day, like I'm still learning how to accept. I mean, like, and again, I'm sure you can attest to this, and most adoptees, kind of, especially like birthdays and things, I never ever wanted a lot of fuss over my birthday. Like, that was never a thing. And it wasn't so much because I thought it was like a sad day or I was mourning or anything. It was just, I don't want to fuss made because I want to be in the limelight, because I just want to just be a fly on the wall, and then I'm good. My place is exactly it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think at some point, obviously, you realize you're not going to be given away. But I think by then, so much of what you've done has been so cemented into the fabric of your persona that you still just it becomes habit and whatnot. For sure.
I so relate, Benjamin. Domestic adoptees often report feelings of not fitting in with their adoptive families, and sometimes also the communities that they're raised in. And InterCountry adoptees have the additional cross-cultural complexities. So I'm wondering, what was and is it like growing up as an adoptee from Brazil in Australia as far as fitting into culture?
Oh, that's a big one. I mean, we already sort of touched on it, even just the fact of like whether I am or not pronouncing the name of the city I was born in, that kind of, it just sums it up. And it's funnily enough, being here on Gold Coast, there's lots of, farmers markets that I'll tend to go to with the family to get our fresh produce for the week. And Gold Coast has a lot of Brazilians here at the moment. I mean, it's just, I think the surf culture has brought a lot to the area in the last sort of 5-10 years.
Yeah.
So I'm always sort of bumping into Brazilians for sure. And one of the market stalls that I go to is run by a Brazilian family. And obviously, they're asking like, oh, where are you from? And sometimes I'm hesitant to tell people. I knew straight away, like I could hear them speaking Portuguese, so I knew they were Brazilian. And for a long time, like being that cultural sort of mix, at times you're hesitant to tell people from Brazil I'm Brazilian, because I feel like I'm a fraud. Because I was born there, but I'm not really immersed in the culture. And I'm, again, like, there's so many layers to that, like my family, and again, not sort of, I guess, wanting to delve into it a lot. And I've spoken to my adopted mum about this in terms of the lack of cultural immersion growing up. But then there's also, I'm 33, so I've had plenty of opportunities in my life to go down that route myself. So I've got to take responsibility for that as well. But yeah, it's kind of funny that even to this day, like running into Brazilians and saying, like I was born in Brazil, and straight away they're like, oh, fala português. And I'm like, nah, sorry, I don't. Like, and then you can kind of see that look. And depending on, like, especially the man that ran the market store yesterday, and I've had it before, where they'll have a look of disappointment because you're one of their own, like you're one of their countrymen, but you don't even speak the language. And they'll kind of just, like he gave me this look, and he even said like, oh, like he gave me some free stuff. I don't know if it was just pity or what. And it's just like, I'm just really disappointed you don't even speak Portuguese. I'm like, yeah, look, I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And it's kind of like, you feel like every time you get into that position, you're letting down your birth country, you're letting down your people and the culture. But at the same time, like Australia is also my people and my culture. So it's a funny one. That's definitely something that's throughout my life has sort of followed me. And it used to be like my parents, when they would meet Brazilians, would say, oh, like our son's from Brazil. And straight away they start wanting to speak to me in Portuguese. And it got to a point, especially when I was in that teen phase where you all these social anxieties and stuff, where I just kind of turned to my mum and dad and said, like, stop telling people I'm from Brazil. Stop it. They're going to ask me if I speak Portuguese. I'm going to say no. And then they're going to be sad and I'm going to be sad. Stop doing it. And it's one of those things. And I think
it's painful.
But again, there's a lot more out there now, and even just obviously growing up, YouTube and all those sort of things weren't as heavily used. Obviously, Instagram and stuff wasn't developed to the stage it is now, where you can jump on, and no matter where you're from, you can find so much, content and things out there, whether it's learning a language, learning cooking, learning painting, like all sorts of things that you can immerse yourself in any culture you want so easily now, that it's a lot different. Obviously, growing up, it just wasn't the case unless you kind of knew someone or something. You don't have that cultural immersion. And again, being the quiet, not rock the boat kid, I wasn't going to go out of my way to ask for it or search for it. It was a funny place to be. And it's definitely a bit of a limbo. I grew up in a pretty white-centered, surfy sort of town. I didn't really surf because I tried like the cold water. And my dad surfed. So he was like, oh, come on, let's go surfing. And he teach me. And like after like 20 minutes, I'm like, I'm going in, I'm cold. So, I didn't really connect with the surf culture I was growing up in. It wasn't until my later years that, being, again, small town in New South Wales, rugby league was a thing. It wasn't until I was like in my late sort of high schooling that I got into rugby league. So I wasn't really in that culture either. Wasn't in the Brazilian culture. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of Black Afro culture outside of the, MTV, a lot of rap and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I've just been a part of a lot of different cultures all mixed up in one. Where do you sit and where do you fit? Very, very different. But
well, and when you're in your formative years and you are growing up within your culture, you pick up cues, little things that you can't learn that on a YouTube video. There's little family and cultural cues that come from just being immersed in it when you're a child. So I really understand that limbo and that struggle of trying to get it now as a grown up and trying to immerse yourself in it and learn it. And thanks for telling us about that.
Yeah, it's constant. It's a constant journey. I think it's kind of fun. Like, it's just giving me something new to do, especially obviously, COVID and there were lockdowns and things going on. Like, what better time to learn a language?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Obviously, there weren't a lot of opportunities back then to engage in that Brazilian culture and language when you're a kid. Just sort of thinking back to that time, like the internet would have even just sort of been new back when you were growing up, wouldn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. And then it's not like now where everyone's got smartphones and everything. For me, if we're on the internet, one, obviously it started up with that dial-up with that god-awful sound. And obviously then, if someone needs to use the phone, well, they're just going to cut your internet out. So, good luck trying to learn a language and halfway through you've got that robotic sound.
Benjamin, you touched on this before, but adopted people are often told, or it's implied, that they should feel grateful and that they're lucky because they have a better life than if they'd stayed with their first families or wherever they came from. What has your experience been in relation to this?
Again, so I touched on this on the iCab sort of video, but I've actually got tattooed across my back from shoulder to shoulder, forever grateful. So again, that kind of sums up. And it was funny, I kind of clued in, I guess, recently, the fact that even the positioning, intentional, unintentional, the fact that it's like you're literally carrying that weight on your back.
Yeah.
But again, for me, like, grateful. And it wasn't like anyone ever said like you need to be grateful. I'm sure like the older generation, I'd hear it a bit, like the sort of older ones, that they'd be like, oh, you're so very lucky and all this stuff. And obviously they're coming from maybe the very little they know of Brazil. It's a huge country, but again, the most that I guess media and things like that and pop culture is going to show Brazil is either going to be, World Cup and football or Carnival, or it's the favelas. And, so a lot of people, they just assume the entire country is just, one big slum and it's all football and drug wars. But like, obviously it's not the case. But for a lot of people, that's the image they're going to get. And again, I guess it's partly the little we have again in media and pop culture of adoption as a whole. It's most adoption stuff that's out there, whether it's movies and different things like that, is going to be some poor kid that's come from some god-awful situation and they get brought to the light, and whether it's some nice God-fearing people that come and save them or otherwise, So it wasn't sort of directly implied, but just through different conversations or different things, there is that kind of, oh, you should be grateful, look at where you are. And even just the fact of, being told like, you're one of 5,000, it's hard not to try and imagine 5,000 kids. And somehow I kind of think of it like the claw machine at the shops, like somehow you get plucked out of that mix.
Just randomly luck.
Like I know from what my adoptive family had told me, like I wasn't too well when they did get me. So whether that was partly the reason why they kind of were able to move me on quicker than some of the others. Obviously, you're still a baby, 13 months. I was still a baby, so I was probably still in hopefully that cute phase where that definitely would help whether you're going to get it plucked out or not. But I know like at 13 months, like I still couldn't sit up. My toes were all like curled over because they just hadn't ever been used. Obviously malnutrition, and probably not a lot of contact outside of the basic needs. I know I think it was pneumonia, but I was quite sick. So I'm sure that probably influenced maybe just moving me on. But then, growing up, I think reading into that, and obviously it's partially, again, you've got to take responsibility for your own self-talk and what you decide to pick up or put down. But I just kind of, definitely held on to that I should be grateful feeling. And so I think that in itself partially means you kind of force yourself to switch off from your needs because you're in a place of like, well, I should be grateful for what I've got. So therefore, like I shouldn't be asking for too much more or striving for too much more, which can have positives in a way of being able to see perspective. I kind of look around and I'm still like, man, like we're doing all right. I've got a roof over my head. I've got running water whenever I need it, food in the fridge. Like to me, I'm kind of like, I'm living humble, but I'm living like a king. Like this is really good. I've seen what else could be out there for the world, and this is very good. But at the same time, kind of, does that then mean you've decided that your ceiling is here when it should be up here? As far as your own needs and what you kind of deserve in life. And it's definitely followed me through to have some negative effects on my life. And something that, you have to learn to break that cycle, especially having kids now. Like I want them to want nothing but the best for themselves. And I think that means knowing when, yes, there's times where you can be grateful for what you have and what you've been given, but then knowing that then that doesn't mean then you should just settle and be complacent with the rest of life. And that's something I think I've definitely had to learn. Speaking to my brother, I don't know if he was, again, we're only now having a lot of these conversations, but how much I guess that being grateful has impacted him as well. Again, I think not having a lot of conversation in the family household means that sometimes I guess some of those feelings and thoughts are not implied, but you kind of just assumptions almost, because it's not like you actually clarify that stuff with the closest people around you, being your parents. Again, like, dad was also adopted, and he kind of came from that hard working, his family were like farmers. He went away to boarding school. So he had a kind of very regimented and very sort of structured way of looking at life. And he was just always just out there to do some hard work and do what he does. So it wasn't like I ever really heard him complain either. So I guess, when you're looking at your greatest male influence, I don't ever really, he just worked hard and worked for the family and did what he did. And I don't ever really remember him, I guess, complaining about the little things too much. So then I guess it doesn't really give you permission to think that it's okay to do so yourself. So you're kind of like, oh, I guess I should just be grateful. So I guess that was a very long-winded answer. No idea if it answered the question, but
it did. And it's something I really resonate, because I grew up in like a country family as well that just worked hard. They didn't navel gaze. They didn't, there wasn't a lot of complaining there. And so when you did sort of think about those things or think about how something might have negatively impacted you, you kind of didn't feel like you had permission to do so. I really resonate with that. Yeah. Benjamin, you enlisted in the Australian Army at the age of 22. What do you think sat behind that decision?
A lot of things. And again, it's only in the last couple of years I've really realized how much, again, adoption and the adoption journey has played a part in a lot of the decision making, and obviously a lot of it stems back to the being grateful and just wanting to, you know, have a place in society, fit in, all those sorts of things. So for me, the army fit a lot of, I guess, met a lot of needs at the time I was at. You know, for me, again, with the whole not wanting to rock the boat and things like that mentality that I had and really sort of forged growing up, part of that was not feeling, I guess, safe emotionally anywhere. Again, it's kind of like, well, if the closest person to you being like your biologically your birth mum can give you away, where are you really safe? So therefore, I, again, very early on developed this mentality, right or wrong, that I emotionally, the only one you can really depend on, I guess, is yourself. So there was only a certain level that I would allow myself to be vulnerable with anyone, even my family. And this was from a very young age. So things like, you know, connection and touch were not a thing. Like I kind of remember when I stopped needing or wanting hugs, or stopped needing or wanting any emotional support. You know, I didn't need anyone to pat me on the back, tell me I'd done good. I didn't need anyone to give me a hug and wipe my tears. For me, it was like, I've got this, it's on me, figure it out, sort it out, and crack on. And so obviously, you know, you look at, well, where does that work kind of well? Well, the military, you know, it's not like you got time to be crying and blubbering on. Like you kind of just dust off and pick up and push on. And so I kind of that started to resonate with me. I'm like, oh, maybe that's a good fit. And then obviously, but you're away for long periods of time. Again, I didn't have that connection. Like I could go away for years and I would not miss people. I could come back and just pick up where I've left off and be fine with that. Just kind of, to me, knowing someone was around or knowing someone was a friend or a family member was like, that to me was all I needed. I know you're there. Cool. If I need you, I'll reach out, but I know you. Like someone says, yeah, I love you. That was kind of enough. So it wasn't like I need that extra something to let me know they really mean it with the hugs or the kisses or the cuddles, presents or anything like that. Like I was fine. So again, for me, like going to the army, I was like, oh, well, like, yeah, sweet, that's good. And I used to, again, I don't know if partially the adoption or whatnot, but then growing up, I started to really, I always liked military stuff where it was movies and shows and different things. So again, just kind of just increased that interest in that level. And yeah, it just really seemed, I guess at the time it was a fit. And it also meant to me, I guess, I found as on an emotional needs level, there's a feeling of belonging. There's a feeling of you have a place, I guess, right, at least in that society, because everyone has a job to a role or a job to play. You know, whether you get into, because I was in the infantry. So infantry, you know, you break it down to just like your squad or your section. Someone has to be like, you know, the scout or the point man. Someone has to be the machine gunner. Someone has to be the check nav guy. Someone has to carry the rate. Like everyone has a job. Therefore, you are to some degree significant or important to some form of a role. And that, I guess, that kind of that family sort of unit cohesiveness. Whether you feeling like there's a lot that you've somehow missed or you feel like you need, it fills a lot of those gaps. But in a way that you don't have to also be emotionally attached to it. So it really was, I guess, the perfect fit. And it was, even now I look back at some of the choices I made. Like I remember the day of enlistment and we're in Brisbane and, you know, I've got all these, everyone's around and you've signed your life away to a degree. You know, you sign a thing, you're sworn in and you now officially kind of, the army now owns you. And, you know, you've got all these families around hugging their sons and their daughters. And this is the last time they're going to say goodbye before you're going to basic training for 3 months. And then you're going off to your whatever training you're doing for your specific role for like another 3 or 4, whatever months. So it's like 6 months where you're probably not going to have a lot of contact with your family, going through a lot of drastic changes. And I just remember, you know, like everyone's crying and all this connections happening. And I kind of just, I threw my bags on the bus, gave my family that hug and was like, yep, I'll see you when I see you. That's it. Bye. Jumped on the bus and sat there. And it wasn't until we're halfway down to Sydney and the guy's still kind of ringing and calling family and a few tears here and there. And I just remember kind of looking out the window and be like, I'm probably not going to see my family in a while. Maybe a longer goodbye was probably a better option. And, it's like, who does that sort of thing? I go like, man, like, am I too emotionally detached? What is that about? And then, from there now I'm kind of like, yeah, you were. Definitely were, man. Like that's because I think now, like imagine my family. Like that was the first time I'd really been away from home for the longest time. So even like I look at that for my brother, I was kind of just like, boom, pop smoke and I'm out of there. Like what would that have been for him, especially being an adoptee, whether abandonment issues are a thing or not? Someone who's maybe one of your closest people to you is kind of to a degree also abandon you. Yeah. And now I'm kind of like, man, like I probably did him dirty by doing that. Like that was not a good move.
Wow.
But yeah, like I guess that was the start of my enlistment. And then, going through, it's kind of, again, even then you're forging an identity in the army and trying to fit in. And that can that can wreak havoc. Because at the time then I was, I was with my partner and then we were getting married through all that and trying to fit into that army culture. It was very much a boys' club and for good reasons too, like it is about like even when you're not at work trying to have like the platoon, you'll have like these big barbecues and functions because it's about really connecting. Because if you're going overseas with the boys, you want to be as close as you can because you can depend on them for your life. And it was kind of, how do I be about that, but then also be about being a husband and a family man, because that really meant a lot to me as well. And even that so many identity issues, and I kind of look now like, man, I feel like part of the problem with trying to get these identities right was the fact that I didn't have a stable idea of who I was from the get-go, because I'd really not connected enough with the adoption journey and how that had influenced who I thought I was or who I was trying to be. So then when you become an adult, all of a sudden you're trying to forge something that you haven't built the stable foundations for growing up.
Yeah, right. That was leading into my next question, I guess. Since you became a father, how has that impacted you in relation to your adoption?
Made me open my eyes to a lot of areas and where I think it's important for me to work on. If I'm going to, obviously, like any parent, you want to make sure that your kids are a better version than you are at all the stages of life. And so I'm like, okay, like, what am I doing or have I done, especially emotionally and internally, that has or hasn't served me, has or hasn't had, a positive, negative impact on my relationships, whether it's, with family, with partners, different things. So yeah, definitely. I think, sorry, you can probably hear the dog barking in the background.
That's all right. But, like, for once, it's not my dog. Carry on.
Yeah, but it definitely, becoming a parent, you kind of, okay, it's now more important than ever to I guess do the work, have a look at what is and isn't serving me, and try and break some of those, I guess, some of those patterns or behavior, some of those thought patterns that just aren't going to be great long run, and I certainly wouldn't want my kids to pick up, because I can already see there are traits in my son where he will internalize things. Like if he's having, my daughter, she'll let you know if she's unhappy or happy. She'll let you know. There's times where I can see my son, you can almost see him physically start to want to bury it, and you can see him internalize. I'm like, whoa, no. Like, I can see what you're doing here, kid, because I wrote that book. Negative, not doing that.
Oh God, I so get that. My one of my sons is a lot like me, that again doesn't need a lot of physical affection, doesn't when I look at him, I think this is how I was with my adoptive mother. I didn't give a lot. I didn't show gratitude very much. I didn't I don't know. I wasn't vulnerable within my family unit at all. And I find him like that in a lot of ways. And I think, have I visited this on you? Is this like part of your DNA, or is this what you've seen from me? And I don't know the answers, to be honest, but I see a lot of myself, and I do worry about some of those things I see sometimes.
That's interesting. Not to flip it, can I ask you a question on that one?
Sure.
It's funny because you mentioned, because I've been thinking about this recently as well, as far as not being vulnerable with family, and therefore it's almost, I've realized, did I even give my family the opportunity to know me? And then now, depending on which family's around and whatnot, and strained relationships or good relationships, yeah, I'm kind of okay, like, where do you sit now as far as, like you're saying, you weren't vulnerable, didn't give your family the opportunity to get too close. How does that sit with you now, I guess, and as far as letting people know you, as opposed to how much you let people know you when you were going through all that?
I wish I had an answer for that, but I mean, usually I'm the one asking the questions. And I think that's because I'm really uncomfortable being vulnerable and talking about things. So I even find if people ask me about adoption, my voice changes. I might start coughing. I don't like to talk about it. And I would say within my family, they probably don't have a very good sense of who I am at times, or maybe they do have a better sense than what I think they do, but I feel like they don't. I don't have the answers for that one, but I do find it very difficult to be vulnerable with them. And it's not from their side, it's from my side. Yeah, I guess it doesn't feel safe to be vulnerable in those places. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, as something, what was it? It was a term that I kind of, like, in my head, I kind of think about a lot now, like trusting vulnerability. I think that's what it's like. For some adoptees, there's a lack of trust in vulnerability. And whether it's just the adoption story alone, or maybe from adoptive parents and family, or foster parents and family, whether they've reinforced, whether that's, if vulnerability is a good thing or not. But I find that it's a lack of trust in vulnerability. Sometimes it's not even the fact that people want to be vulnerable or don't want to be vulnerable. It's just like, there's just a lack of trust in that whole process.
Yeah, I would say it takes me years and years to open up to people and to form really strong relationships. And those relationships I've taken probably from childhood on, really good friends and husband, and it's taken years to build those.
Well, I know, like, in my instance, like, the mother of my children, like, we're separated now, but she pretty much had to teach me how to love in so many ways. Like, I'd had other relationships and long-term relationships, but it wasn't until her that I kind of really had to learn how to receive love. Again, like the whole vulnerability thing, like, oh no, like, I don't need it, I'm good, I'll give it, and I want to shower people. But obviously it's a two-way street, love. I'm learning that one. But yeah, I felt like even the little things, holding hands and things, because again, like I said, I was not one for personal touch, didn't need it, I didn't feel like I was lost or was any better off with or without. So obviously, depending on the people that you're with and what their needs are, for her, she was one of those people, like, she needed to have that close connection, like, walking around holding hands, those sorts of things. It was something I really had to learn.
It doesn't come natural, does it?
No.
It's something, I remember watching my sister, who was had a PhD in how to be vulnerable and available and affectionate and a great mother and all those things. And I remember I used to copy her because I knew she got it right.
Wow.
Yeah. Benjamin, David Brzezinski, he's researched and written a lot about adoption. He says that all adoptees search, and even just our very wonderings and musings over who our parents might be is in fact searching, even if no steps are actually taken. So I was just wondering, have you taken any steps to search for your biological family?
Again, it's more of a recent thing. Whether the whole being grateful and not rocking the boat played a part, whether I don't know, again, like we're saying, even just the fact that searching opens you up to a little bit of vulnerability of, I don't know what I could find. I guess a lot of things now I'm kind of bringing to light as to maybe why I have or haven't searched. But it's only been in the last, I think, year or so, something like that I kind of 2 or 3 years, my bad. I remember I got from Christmas, I think it was my brother, he gave me one of those DNA test kits. I think it was Ancestry.com, one of those. And even that, I think, sat somewhere in my cupboard for like a good year before I even like, that's a big deal. Like, someone gives you that and, oh wow, like, that's really cool, let's do it. Somehow that sat in my cupboard for about a year before I pulled it out. I was like, oh, maybe I should do this. And I did that, sent that away, and most of the connections I've got, they're all distant, sort of third, fourth, cousins, that sort of thing. But even that, it kind of, because of I liked the fact that it at least gave you a breakdown of, obviously it's somewhat of a hit and miss sort of thing, but it kind of gave you a breakdown of your DNA in terms of how much is Afro, how much is Portuguese, how much is, like South American, how much is, other parts of Europe, all that sort of thing. So even that was kind of like cool, just to bring a little piece of the puzzle into play, because it kind of like, I know I'm Afro-Brazilian, but who knows, like I didn't really know where from, other than obviously reading historically whereabouts Portuguese took their slaves from. So I could kind of see where majority of the DNA sort of links seem to stem from. It's like, okay, like that makes sense. And that kind of brings to light a few things. And then I actually ended up connecting with like one of the fourth, fifth, something like that, cousins. Wow. Who lives in LA. And so her mother had traveled from Brazil to America, and somehow we've got connections. So even then, just like talking to her, and she's interested in family trees and stuff like that. So we've kind of been together now, delving into and finding through her mother's side, at least, connections back in Brazil. And that's kind of obviously given me at least a bit more of an opportunity to, okay, like, these are connections. And then so we can kind of say, did anyone know anyone from the family that happened to be in Belo Horizonte during this time of their lives, and all that sort of stuff. And, it's interesting because it was kind of just something I for myself, I just put away. I was like, it's never going to happen, so don't worry about it. Because it's, I was one of 5,000. I have like my adoption papers and things like that, but there's very little, my adoption papers have father unknown. It's got my mother's name, Amelia Maria da Silva, but then that's it. She gave birth to me, at least in the hospital, which was good. But then as soon as she was able to, she kind of was able to get up and leave and leave me there to be put up for adoption. So I've got like no other links or anything to go on. So I've put in some paperwork that I think was through the ICAV website, as far as being able to get any other official documentation from your birth country. So I'm kind of waiting for that to come in as well, just in case there's anything else. I remember looking up the orphanage that I come from, but it was a government-run orphanage, which is now closed down. And there's a lot of stories of neglect and whatnot. I think that government branch now just runs prisons, so it probably got converted. But yeah, it's been a recent, I guess, journey as far as delving into searching and what does that mean. And I think because I realized, again, for my own self-improvement and development, and therefore to be a better version of myself for my kids at the very least, which is funny, I still put my kids first. Like, it's not even, it's not even for me, it's for my kids. Some should be for me. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, for that own development, I realized, well, to move forward, there's going to be a level in which I need to move back and put together those foundation pieces. And so part of that has been, I guess, allow myself to be curious, allow myself to, okay, like, it's okay to look or care about birth mother or birth father. So it's been recent. I at this point, I'm not really any closer to saying, oh, I found someone, I'm going to meet them, or anything like that. But it's a journey, and it's for me, it's just fun. It's something new, a new aspect of life to look at. Mix that with trying to learn Portuguese and look at, now that travel is kind of opening up again, trying to save some money, and I can kind of go there, because I guess the beauty of at least being born there is this, as long as I do all the stuff down at the consulate down in Sydney, I can get my passport and still be a citizen, so I can go and travel and spend a good amount of time there without having to worry about the visa issues and stuff. So definitely something I'm developing. And again, talking to my brother, it's something that he's kind of now developing. The more that we talk about things, the more, I guess, it opens up those doors for both of us. Because growing up, like I've said before, it wasn't really spoken about at all. We didn't really bring it up, so therefore our parents didn't really bring it up. I know, like, our dad, he, quite late in life, like, I was still at home, but I was I was probably in like my late teens or 20s, and he'd been contacted and by his biological family down in Sydney, and had kind of gone down to Sydney and met up with them and stuff like that, but hadn't told us at all.
Yeah.
And like, I know, like, everyone's got their own thing, their own journey, and obviously there's a lot of uncertainty, pain. Like, I don't know, because we didn't talk about it. I don't know what was going on for him internally, but obviously there was a lot for him to not think that that's something that you would share with the two other people in your life that are adopted, and probably would celebrate that for you. Like, for me, it's like, man, like, I remember talking to him about it, and like you realize, like, I would have just been happy for you. Like, I would have, like, I don't know, again, like, it's hard to tell if, as a parent, they thought he was, they thought they were protecting us because it's something that he got an opportunity to do that maybe we didn't. Who knows? But so, like, that alone, just the fact that he couldn't talk about the fact that he did get that chance to search and find family, I guess really sort of closed those doors as to whether I should be doing that sort of thing as well, or talking about it. So I'm kind of now searching and doing that sort of stuff, and now having to speak to my adoptive parents about what that means. And obviously for them, that would be probably tricky and emotional in some ways. And they've never said no, or never said they wouldn't support me in anything like that, but it was never spoken about either. And I think the more I look at, the more questions I have, I'm sure some of those questions probably aren't that comfortable for them as parents, or might feel like, whether they are or not, being attacked as to their parenting styles or how they went about things. It's a very long and interesting journey, for sure.
It's just so complex, isn't it? I often feel like adoption, there's this carpet, there's these seemingly simple choices that we have to make, to search or not to search, to talk about things or not to talk about things. And underneath this carpet, there's just so much uncertainties sort of bubbling around, so much that we sometimes don't even have the words for, to understand, but it's just sitting there underneath those. And it's just when we're ready to pick them up and make some choices, or, go in a particular direction.
Absolutely. I think there's a level of, like, I think now I'm like, okay, like I'm not searching. Like, what about the other side? Do I have family that wonder about, my existence? Like, I could have family that don't even know about my existence, most likely. Like, I think, it's kind of both sides. The more you think about the fact that, like, as an adoptee, obviously we're very cognizant of how it has impacted our life. And I guess there's the whole other side of birth mothers and fathers, or cousins, uncles, brothers, sisters, like a whole other family network that you technically belong to a degree, that, for various reasons you don't now, or do once you've had that reconnection. And then what does that mean for them?
So as I mentioned in the introduction, Benjamin, you're one of 8 participants in the educational videos aimed at teaching medical and counselling professionals. And the videos are a fantastic resource. And if you haven't already, you need to go and watch them and send the link to any of those professionals that are in your life. Benjamin, what was it like being involved in the videos, and why did you put your hand up?
I think one of the biggest reasons I really wanted to be involved was because I'd recently, or somewhat recently at that stage, found the ICAV website and that sort of network, and I was blown away by the magnitude of adoptee voices out there that were connecting, telling their stories, sharing similarities, bringing all sorts of things that, like I'd said, having not a lot spoken about in the home environment, I was like, holy crap, there's a lot of adoptees out here. And like, that in itself can be somewhat overwhelming, because you're kind of used to being the novelty, you're used to being like the only one, and you just got this plethora of individuals out there with different stories, similar stories, all sorts of things. And I was like, wow, this is huge. And I could see already how much it was helping me along my journey, and kind of give me that permission, I guess, to want to speak up or speak out about things, whether it was with friends or family, and also wanting to learn more about adoption as a whole, my adoption, and also just how to help others maybe get to that stage. Because I think, like I said, the more I look now into my life, the more I see how many of my decisions and the things that I've done in my life and patterns have been influenced by adoption. And I'm kind of like, man, like, if I can just maybe help be a part of the voice that brings things to light for people maybe sooner than when I've kind of come across stuff, it might just help people maybe make a few less mistakes in their life, or help them get onto that journey a little bit quicker. so maybe they can find some happiness that I feel like I kind of just robbed myself of just through some bad choices.
Yeah.
So when they kind of put out the word to see who wanted to be a part of it, I kind of thought, oh, that seems like a good place to start. And it was a great sort of experience. And as a few people I'm still can chat with and connect with. There's a couple of guys from the Brisbane area, so it's not too far from me. So I'm kind of trying to connect with them when I can. And it was good sort of traveling down to Sydney and being a part of the filming and everything, and just even the questions being asked. I was like, there was some things where I was like, oh, like, what does that mean to me? And you kind of, again, like something like today, like this interview, it kind of forces yourself to actually have a look in and have a look at, where do I sit with this and where do I sit with that? And it might be something that might be completely out of the blue that comes through conversation where I'm like, I might need to look at that one a little bit more. But yes, it was awesome. And I definitely do more of it where I can, just to lend that voice. Because I think, again, not to stereotype, but obviously in some ways, male and female, like the difference between how well men can kind of communicate in a lot of areas can still sometimes need a little bit of guidance. So definitely for young males as well, young males who are adopted, or at least know someone that's adopted or be a part of a family that have adopted someone. I think it's important to sort of maybe just be a part of something that sparks a bit of conversation with whoever it needs to be, but especially young males, because I think we've got enough closed off, emotionally detached males out there. Sure, it works in some ways. It's great on the work site, it might be great on the battlefield, but that's probably about it, really. It's a very small percentage of a wider community which kind of needs someone to be able to at least voice their needs and understand and connect to what maybe emotionally is going on for them, so it doesn't blow up.
Yeah. So in relation to those three professionals, is there anything that you can identify now that would have been really helpful to you when you were growing up, or even, in the last few years, if there'd been knowledge or support about what would have been helpful for you?
I think, again, like definitely in line with young males and feeling, again, it's that vulnerable thing, right? Like being able to be in a place where they feel safe enough to talk or find who they need to talk to. So I think all three of the areas, as far as whether it's doctors, mental health professionals, or the schooling system, being able to identify where, as the person that's in a greater place of power, whether it's a teacher, a counselor, a doctor, or a parent, obviously you're going to be in a greater place of power than, say, a young person who's come under your charge in some way. In that place of power, being able to identify where you need to step in as the adult and maybe help them along the way, or at least give them the tools and show them the doors. And then obviously it's up to them to a degree to walk through it. And so whether that's a case like the doctors, like I know for myself, again, partially because I just didn't have a lot of self-worth, didn't want to rock the boat, all those things that we've mentioned. For me, again, a part of that is my arms pretty much got to be falling off before I'm going to see a doctor. Because to me, I'm like, just lick some dirt and get on with it. Like, how bad is it? Don't worry about it. You're good. Don't, when I was younger, it was more about don't complain. So I kind of suck it up. Let's go. How many young males are doing that? And then if a young male is finally coming to a doctor and saying, hey, I've got this issue, I've got that issue, knowing maybe some probing questions that indirectly you can find out a bit more about their situation growing up as to why it's taken maybe so long for them to come to see you, or even just the fact that they come to see you about this, but it turns out they've got 3 other ailments that they haven't bothered doing anything about, and now they're seeing a doctor, as some males will do. Okay, and then if there's a lot going on for them, and it might not even be adoption, it just might be a lot going on for them as to why they're closed off to and disconnected to their own bodies, and understand that this stuff needs to be addressed. Okay, like here's also some counseling or different things that might help now that we've spoken about all these other areas. Or here's a doctor that's more in line with what you might want. It might be someone that might just be the only Black kid or the only Asian kid in their community, and you've got 3 doctors to go to. I'm like, hey, I can refer you on to this doctor if you want. Some people might see it as, is that a form of racism, or you're assuming things? But for someone of color, it seems racist, but in so many ways, you would feel so much more comfortable with someone that looks like you. And that's just fact. And I think that's for anyone. Like, if you're a white person, you travel to somewhere in Asia and you see another white person, you're going to be like, oh, hey, like, because just birds of a feather flock together. And I find like that alone can be, it's kind of like a female can go to a male doctor or go to a female doctor. A lot of times, depending on what you're talking about, it's probably a bit more comfortable going to a female doctor. Like, that's just fact. So obviously, yeah, like having a look at someone's background, understanding their story a bit more as a health professional can kind of help maybe steer them into a direction to where they're going to be able to identify and find more help down the road. And I think that's the same with, schooling and different things. Just whether schools can have the capacity, and there's so many elements. I'm not in education, so obviously there's a lot of elements that I know nothing about that need to be taken into consider. But as far as like the multicultural groups or places in which someone that might have some sort of different aspect of their life can feel proud to shine light on that. And it can be something simple as, depending on the curriculum, and there's a place where they can do some sort of oral presentation on all sorts of things, whether it's not so much encouraging, but having that positive sort of influence to say, like, if someone wanted to speak about their adoption or someone wanted to speak about different family aspects, and that could be whether it's a local adoption or intercountry adoption. Again, it's as a teacher, or any sort of educator, how empowered are they within the system to understand the complexities of any form of adoption? And then in doing so, then how are they empowered to support a child that might be going through that, because they're going, that child's going through all the normal teen stuff that happens, plus then the identity stuff on top of that, plus any other family stuff. And, it can be a lot for a young person, and just knowing that they've got someone that may not fully understand, but you kind of know that they're in your corner.
They're interested.
I think that's a big thing, and it can be the difference between for a young person to be able to want to speak up, or even just take that home, and they can do it at home where maybe they're more comfortable within their own family unit as well. For sure.
Well, we're coming up to the end, which I'm really sorry about, because you've been an absolute legend, Benjamin. I've loved this chat, and I've learnt so much. But I was just wondering if you've got any other thoughts that you'd like to leave us with today.
I don't know, without going too far overboard or over time, there's a lot. But I think people like yourself just need to be recognized for, you've taken your adoption journey and been like, how can I help the wider community? And in doing so, you create these platforms such as this, and like ICAB and Linnell and people like that. I think it's it can just make a real big difference for a lot of people, because whether they're comfortable, like we said, in their own home space or not, they're going to search it at some point, or have thought about searching. And it is platforms like this that can really spark huge change. And for adoptees out there, I think it's just being reminded that you're worthy of that change, and you're worthy of that happiness, and you're worthy of more than just being grateful or thinking that this is just it, and I'll just kind of just crack on with life. Like, you're worthy of being able to make it what you want to make of it. So I think that's it's important, and something that I definitely shied away from for a long time. So I'd hope that there aren't too many out there like me. And unfortunately, if there are, well, then hopefully they get to listen to your podcast. Like, I've listened to, obviously knowing I was being on here, like listen to episodes, and it's just amazing, just the stories and things that come out and what people do and go through. So I think it's definitely a big thank you to yourself and others out there like you, for sure.
Thanks, Benjamin. Thank you. And look, thank you so much again. And we'll be putting links to the ICAV website and the educational videos on the podcast notes page, so people can have a look. And if there's any other links you want us to put up, Benjamin, please let me know. Thank you so much for joining us. I know there are going to be a lot of people who are going to benefit from hearing this episode. And like you said before, particularly being a male voice, it's really important, because it's actually harder for me to find men to talk about their experiences on the podcast. So I'm really grateful for you doing that. I am forever grateful.
Just don't get the tattoo.
I won't get the tattoo. No. Look, so that will wrap up from here. And I just want to say that if you have a story that you'd like to share with us, if you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, jump onto the main podcast page of the Jigsaw Queensland website and complete the prospective guest form that you'll find there. And note that Adopt Perspective can be listened to by people all over the world. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Adopt Perspective podcast. If you'd like to find out more, go to the podcast page on www.jigsawqueensland.com and you'll find a wealth of information and resources on the website. If you reside in Queensland, you can reach Jigsaw Queensland's Forced Adoption Support Service on toll-free 1800 210313, or you can call Jigsaw on 07 33 58 6666. If you live in another state of Australia, you can still call the Forced Adoption Support Service number and your call will be answered by the Forced Adoption Support Service in the state that you're calling from. In every other state, Relationships Australia operates this service. A big thank you to Matt Sparrow for composing and recording our original theme music. Until next time, I'm Jo Sparrow saying farewell from Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption.